in London, and this is CNN.
Welcome back to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting from Washington. Crews are racing against time to find survivors of the worst earthquake to hit Nepal in 80 years. Rescue teams have found some people alive in the rubble, including this little boy, but hopes of finding more survivors, those hopes are fading as the hours pass. The death toll now approaching 4,000, many thousands of others injured. The U.S. State Department, they are saying that they are aware of at least 4 Americans who have died. Drone video shows an aerial view of some of the moments and the monuments and the buildings damaged by the quake. Many buildings that have stood there for centuries, they were toppled. Governments and aid agencies from around the world, they're rushing to get assistance to Nepal. So far, at least 16 countries plus the European Union have announced that they are sending aid. The epicenter of the magnitude 7.8 quake was less than 50 miles northwest of Nepal's capital of Kathmandu. A powerful aftershock yesterday hit closer to Mount Everest, where the quake triggered a deadly avalanche. And so far, there's been little information on the damage and the death toll from more remote areas. Our senior international correspondent, Arwa Damon, reports from Kathmandu.
Nakul Tamang managed to scale the ladder before rescue teams stopped him. The building is not secure, but Tamang doesn't care. His father is buried somewhere under the rubble of a collapsed church behind the school. He was the pastor. It's sad. It's hard, Tamang says. So far, 6 bodies were recovered here. Many more remain. Most shops are closed. People unwilling to venture far from their families, especially those lucky enough to still have each other.
This was a 5-story building. The bottom 3 floors have completely collapsed and only 2 are visible. But for some of those who are waiting here, there is a little bit of hope, because more than a day after the earthquake happened, the rescuers managed to find a woman. She wasn't even really harmed, in a lot of shock, but alive.
And that's what keeps Narayang Gurung believing his wife and 7-year-old daughter are still alive. I raced here after the earthquake. I haven't slept for days, he says. Workers dig painstakingly, slowly removing piles of stones and debris. They spot someone's hair, but can't yet reach the body or tell if it's male or female. For Gurung, it's too much. All he remembers now is how happy he and his family were. Throughout the city, makeshift camps. Many families are still too afraid of aftershocks to go home. This is Kathmandu's main park. Outside a mobile medical clinic, the walking wounded wait. This woman injured when panicked crowds stampeded. A little boy hit by a falling brick. I felt something like a fire and I ran. And then something hurt me a lot, he says. I am still scared. And so is everybody else. Those who survived clinging to those they love. The tremors may have stopped for now, but the terror remains.
And Arwa is joining us now live on the phone from Kathmandu. Arwa, update us on what you know about this search and rescue effort that's clearly underway.
Well, it's still very intense and very difficult, Wolf, as you saw in that piece. It's quite overwhelming, even though you do have all of these international teams that are arriving from nations around the world, really sending quite a bit of support, but it's still not enough at this stage. They need the heavy machinery on the ground that they would use to move the large pieces of rubble, and it's just so time-consuming and painstaking of a process. It really takes quite a lot of manpower. And so while everyone on the ground is really doing the best that they can, it's simply not enough. And of even more concern, Wolf, is not just, of course, the search and rescue effort happening here in the capital, but what's happening in those far-flung areas that teams have not even been able to reach just yet. These are places that are so remote. In normal times, it can take days to reach them. So imagine how difficult it is going to be to reach them under these circumstances when roads are blocked off, and really the only ways in or out is by helicopter.
And so what I take it are the numbers that we're hearing, nearly 4,000 confirmed dead, many thousands of others injured. Once they get closer to the epicenter, you're in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, the epicenter about 50 miles outside of Kathmandu. Once they get closer and closer to those remote areas, potentially, and we hope it doesn't happen, but they could find a lot more bodies. Is that the fear?
It most definitely is. In fact, the head of one aid organization was saying that in his estimation, the death toll could rise as high as 10,000. So many of these areas have yet to be reached. So many of these areas, because they're so remote, even if someone survived the earthquake, survived the landslides, the concern is that without proper food, water, if they're injured, which that is something we are potentially having to grapple with, and the aid organizations are trying to find a way around of how far away these places are. One man who we met earlier this morning has family living about 20 kilometers away from the epicenter. He has two cousins who work on Mount Everest. He has not heard from them. There is no communication at all to these areas. He has no idea how he's actually going to get there. And so the fear is that when various aid groups, rescue missions do reach these places, what they're going to find is going to be beyond potentially horrific.
Certainly is. Arwa Damon, part of our team of excellent reporters who are there on the scene for us, doing amazing work. Arwa, be careful over there. We'll stay in very, very close touch with you. A warning to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. Some of you may find these pictures upsetting. Families in Nepal are being forced to wait in line for funerals. Traditionally, the dead are buried in funeral pyres and designed spots in Nepal, but with nearly 4,000 dead so far, many are carrying out Hindu rituals in neighborhoods or open fields, while others wait in long lines at traditional temples to give last rites. To find out how you can help the victims once again of this Nepal earthquake, and I want you to do so if you at all can, go to cnn.com/impact. You'll have a chance to impact your world. We're staying on top of the story. We'll be right back.
On May 7th, the UK braces for one of the most uncertain elections in decades, with its European future hanging in the balance. The voter divide is widening. Can the Conservatives take full control? Will the Scotland referendum sway opinion and affect the numbers? Quest and Max Foster for complete coverage of the 2015 UK elections. May 7th on CNN.
Innovators, influencers, they've reached the top and are today's leading women, inspiring individuals sharing their insights on CNN. This month, you know their names, maybe you've worn the dress or walked in the shoes. What it took for Diane von Furstenberg and Tory Burch to become fashion icons.
This year we celebrate our 40th anniversary of the wrap dress, and that dress I owed everything.
Leading women, Saturday on CNN.
And see the impact firsthand. When you face the reality of famine, genocide, and natural disaster, you can't help but be affected. But these experiences are important. They give us knowledge.
She says yes, women are the future.
And they give us no choice but to ask questions, especially the ones people don't want to answer.
This is a pretty shocking picture. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths?
These experiences don't just make it possible for us to know where the story might go. They demand that we go with it.
It begins with a spark, a eureka moment. join me and meet the great inventors of our time. Ingenious products, breakthrough technology, revolutionary science.
Join Nick Glass for Make, Create, Innovate in Quest Means Business.
He's Michael House.
He's Amra Walker. And this is CNN.
We're staying on top of the breaking news out of Nepal, the huge earthquake, 7.8 magnitude. We're following what's going on. We'll get back there. Much more on the search and rescue operation that's underway. Stay with us for that. But there's some other important news we're following as well. These people, they're searching for a better life in Europe. Instead, though, many of these migrants find themselves in a situation that can only be characterized as a living hell. In an exclusive report, our Nick Payton Walsh and his team offer us a glimpse into the seamy underbelly of human smuggling. We must warn you, some of the images you're about to see are graphic.
You've seen where the victims of this continental trade in misery end up, in boats adrift, on beaches drained of life. But here we expose how the smuggled find themselves in this hell. A CNN producer stumbles into a Tripoli meeting with a smuggler who thinks she is a Syrian looking to bring more Syrians to cross to Europe. She uses her phone to secretly record his offer.
لو في معكم جروب لو جبتوا 10 تنفار في لكم تخفيض حلو كل نفر تسحبوه بيخفض عليكم $100 فتح معي ها جبت 10 تنفار بتحصل تذكرة بلوشي هاي معروفة.
He insists they use satellite phones, GPS, new motors and a pilot who isn't Libyan but Senegalese. He's from Mali and drives CNN to the unfinished building their migrants wait in to cross. To enter, she walks over trash, pretending to tell someone in Syria the details on her phone. Inside this sick underworld, there are more than the 80 migrants who they were told would be in their boat.
بس عدد الناس كتير.
هي كلام علبة نفر.
لا. اثنين.
مرتين سفينة.
Now, maybe these people's last days on dry land.
امتى بسافر القارب؟ معاهم كل هدول بنطلع احنا؟ كم من واحد فيهم؟
هيك 30 ما زال في الأوضة الثانية. العدد كله 80.
The TV is always on, the rooms hidden behind curtains, but the trade so baldly cynical, so patently inhumane. Nick Payton Walsh, CNN, Tripoli.
What a heartbreaking story that is as well. Up next, other news we're following, including the former president of the United States, George W. Bush, breaking his silence on the Obama administration's policies around the world. Now he's calling his successor naive when it comes to Iran and a failure in the war against ISIS. Much more when we come back.
You know what makes things unique here? The people.
So we should make in India because of the people.
There's a solid research infrastructure, new government support. Things are changing.
We're looking for a joint venture partner for product development and process chemistry.
It's a $1 billion growth sector in India. Firms that formulate, manufacture, and distribute globally. It's all here and it works.
On the next Inside Africa.
With a cuisine that stretches back thousands of years. An economy that relies very heavily on its exports of coffee. This week, we are exploring Ethiopia's food and drink, its staples and some new directions.
Inside Africa, Tuesday only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
Some call me nature. Others call me Mother Nature. I've been here for over 4.5 billion years. 22,500 times longer than you. I don't really need people. I have fed species greater than you, and I have starved species greater than you. How you choose to live each day doesn't really matter to me. I am nature. I will go on. I am prepared to evolve. Are you?
Coming up on Open Court, make way for the clay. The race to Roland Garros heats up in Monte Carlo.
There's no better place to start a clay court season than here.
Plus, they call him the mastermind.
The pressure she has is unbelievable because every time she wins, it's normal, and if she loses, it's what's happening.
Hear what it's like coaching world number one Serena Williams and wedding in Scotland. Andy Murray ties the knot on Open Court
in association with Rado.
Mr. President, welcome to the program. John Stewart, Archbishop Justin Welby, welcome. Grace and Perry, good to see you.
I love this idea that Britain was this big enveloping quilt that you could wrap yourself up in.
I'm sure you must be their first cycling president. You were trying to show the absurdity of these preconceived notions. What do you want people to take away?
This type of authoritarian regime is unsustainable.
When the anti-Balakas came to your village, what did you do?
We wanted to try and negotiate, but they wouldn't listen to us.
What are you telling the parents now? Because they say, we saw our children alive and we want to get them back alive. Holy Father, you played a key role in establishing the Global Freedom Network. What exactly motivated your passion?
Human slavery is a crime against humanity.
Many of our institutions are busy apologizing for sexual abuse of children.
The church has to get it right.
Amanpour, next on CNN.
For more than years, former President George W. Bush has been largely quiet about his successor. But at a fundraiser over the weekend, the former president lashed out at President Obama's foreign policy, especially his handling of the situation with Iran and the war against ISIS. Joining us now is Josh Rogan. He's the CNN political analyst and columnist for Bloomberg View. Josh, you broke this story over the weekend because it's pretty extraordinary. Former President Bush, he's been relatively quiet, almost completely quiet, doesn't want to go after President Obama, is staying back, but now he has decided to go out there and speak. What did he say?
In pretty shocking and new comments, for the first time in a very long time, George W. Bush criticized the sitting president in a closed-door meeting on Iran, ISIS, his handling of Russia, and many other things. He basically said that President Obama has been naive in his handling of the Iran nuclear deal. He said that President Rouhani doesn't necessarily represent a new policy for Iran, just that he's a new spokesman. And he said that we're losing the war on ISIS and that the president really doesn't have a plan to solve that problem.
Do we know why he decided all of a sudden to break that silence and go public and, for all practical purposes, not only criticize but condemn the current president's foreign policy?
Well, he did say at the beginning that he didn't want to enter the political arena and he didn't feel it was right to criticize the president. But then he went on to criticize the president pretty severely. We can say that perhaps he thought he had comfort in the off-the-record setting, although the information leaked almost immediately after.
There was a huge group inside there, right?
There were a lot of people there. There were a lot of reports about it. I got some of the details. Other reporters got other details. Perhaps he just had a lot to get off his chest, and he was just ready to make those comments.
And he basically was suggesting that the proposed nuclear deal with Iran would be a disaster for the United States. Is that what he was saying?
He said three things. He said, one, to lift sanctions before Iran had agreed to stop their nuclear program was short-sighted. He also said that President Obama's contention that you can just snap back sanctions after the fact wasn't plausible. He also said that the deal would have long-term implications for U.S. security. He said, think of our grandchildren and how the deal will affect them. That was a direct shot at the deal.
And the forum where he spoke was at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas. Tell us about that.
It's the Republican Jewish Coalition, a group that's heavily funded by Republican Jewish donors. It was held at the Venetian Hotel, which is owned by Sheldon Adelson, who was in attendance.
He owns the Venetian Hotel. He's a billionaire.
He owns the hotel. He's a contributor to the Republican Jewish Coalition. And it was basically a meeting of the top Republicans Republicans, many of candidates who were all assembled there for the weekend to hear off-the-record comments from top Republican officials, including George Bush.
Well, was there any indication he did this, the former president, to help his younger brother become the next president of the United States? Was that the motivation?
I think actually there's counter indications. He said during the remarks that he realized that he was a liability for his brother as his brother contemplates a run for the presidency. He said you wouldn't see him on the campaign trail because he said during the debate all somebody has to mention is the name Bush, and that could hurt Jeb while he's running. So at once he's promising to stay out of Jeb's way. At the same time, he's interjecting himself with these comments because they got into the public so quickly.
Josh Rogan, good reporting. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still to come here in Washington, the House committee investigating the Benghazi terror attack, now examining hundreds of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's emails. The Republicans may not necessarily, though, find what they're looking for. We have new information. Stay with us.
Sorry I'm late. I was working on my intelligent home system. It lets you turn on your washing machine and set your heating remotely. It's amazing.
We could have at least come up with an intelligent excuse.
You'll soon be able to fly on a fully electric plane, and I'm helping to make it possible.
Wow. Oh, did you remember to change the light bulb in the lounge?
EDF continues to support progress today through the EDF Pulse Awards. Give pioneers your support too by voting for your favorite project at pulse.edf.com.
From the shores of the Caspian Sea, in the ancient land of Azerbaijan, rises the first European Games. Be part of sporting history in Baku this June. The European Games, Baku 2015, rise to the occasion.
Go for life in the fast lane, in the car and off the track. Go fast. Go tech. Go legendary. Go head to head. Go with the latest Formula One events. Tuesday on CNN in association with DHL.
I'm Richard Quest in New York, and this is CNN.
From Beirut, in New Delhi, from Jerusalem, in Jordan, in Doha, in Istanbul, in Cairo, and here in Abu Dhabi. All roads are barricaded to Taksim Square. These are the midday press. This is the old city of Jerusalem, and this is a melting pot of religions. Of your support for Hamas. Can we clear this up? Let me push you once more on this, because this is important. How big a concern should this be for not just Turkey, but the West? Tell me something even locals might not know. Who is the biggest influence? Is it still family?
Connect the world with Becky Anderson. Sunday to Thursday on CNN.
I'm Aisha Sasay in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
It's about time. That's how the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, described the swearing in of Loretta Lynch to become the next U.S. Attorney General. Lynch was confirmed by a Senate vote last week. She's the first African-American woman to lead the U.S. Justice Department. In her own remarks, she thanked the president for his patience, said she looks forward to restoring trust in law enforcement and protecting the rights of victims. The Clinton Foundation now admits it made mistakes in the way it reported government donations on its tax returns. In a blog posted on Sunday, the acting CEO wrote a rare admission, quote, "So yes, we made mistakes, as many organizations of our size do, but we are acting quickly to remedy them and have taken steps to ensure they don't happen in the future." The foundation also plans to refile at least 5 years of returns. The nonprofit also addressed questions about the foundation's donor disclosure practices, insisting its policies on transparency and contributions from foreign governments are now, quote, "stronger than ever." In the meantime, Representative Trey Gowdy and the House Select Committee are examining 300 of Hillary Clinton's emails. They're looking for any evidence of security lapses in the days and weeks leading up to the terrorist attack in Benghazi, Libya. But now sources tell CNN they found no, quote, "smoking gun" in these 300 email messages. For more, let's bring in our global affairs correspondent, Elise Labbe. She's joining us from New York. Elise, the State Department plans to release some of these emails publicly in the coming weeks, but your source has seen at least some of them. What do they say?
Well, several sources, Wolf, are saying that, there's not a lot of there in terms of anyone was looking for great insights on Hillary Clinton's actions leading up to Benghazi or afterwards. There's just not that much information in these emails. In fact, a lot of them, about a third of them, are mundane things like scheduling, logistics. Very little talk about security, Wolf. Very little talk about Benghazi. There is some evidence that Secretary Clinton and her inner circle, which is who she was emailing from her private circle, server, were interested in the fallout from Benghazi and how it might affect Secretary Clinton and the State Department as a whole, but nothing really indicating that Secretary Clinton was, there was no stand down order, as some Republicans charge about the night of Benghazi. Secretary Clinton did not try to stop help from getting to the consulate on the ground, and there's no evidence of any type of administration cover-up, Wolf. In fact, there's an email from the office of Senator John McCain the day after the attack. One of his staffers even praising Secretary Clinton for her address to State Department employees the day after the tragedy, and asking her office to convey the fact that Senator McCain really appreciated those remarks. So there's a mixture from the mundane to the interesting, but certainly no great insights from that, Wolf.
So very quickly, where does the investigation now go?
Well, they're looking for Secretary Clinton to testify, and there's a little bit of a debate on how that'll go. I think Republicans on the committee, Representative Gowdy, really wants to do a private interview with Secretary Clinton first. Secretary Clinton wants to do that public hearing, get all the questions out, and is interested in just speaking to the public at this point, Wolf, not really interested in having a private interview with the committee.
All right, Elise Labbe is in New York, so is the Secretary of State. We'll stay in touch with you. Thank you. That's it for me. I'll be back 5 p.m. Eastern in the Situation Room. For our international viewers, Amanpour is coming up next. For our viewers in North America, Newsroom with Brooke Baldwin starts right now.
Tonight, as the death toll in Nepal rises to 4,000, I asked the UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator what to expect from far-flung villages and valleys.
We urgently need to get the search and rescue teams in there. We need to get the rubble moved so that we can see whether others are trapped in that rubble. And then we have to get aid to these people who so desperately need it.
Plus, anguish at the very top of the world. Rescue helicopters airlift stranded survivors off Mount Everest, but many are still trapped or missing. I speak to a man who scaled the treacherous summit no less than 11 times. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the program. I'm Christiane Amanpour. A nightmare in Nepal. This new drone video just in with a different look at the devastation wrought by Saturday's massive earthquake. Some 4,000 people are now dead, a number certain to climb even higher in the days to come. The capital, Kathmandu, while still hit hard, appears to be in better shape than feared at first. And now the real question is what is happening in the villages near the epicenter, where rescue workers haven't yet been able to reach. Aid is only just trickling in, and many Nepalese terrified of aftershocks are still sleeping outside. One woman says she's been offered nothing so far, not even a drop of water. And CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is already helping with some surgeries at Kathmandu's main hospital, managed to talk to the country's president, who arrived earlier today unexpectedly to visit the wounded.
As a president, I'd like to thank all the international community and to my people. They all are helping each other, and we are ready to tackle these calamities.
A calamity indeed, and in a moment we will hear from Valerie Amos, the top UN official on the humanitarian response. But first to Kunda Dixit. He is the editor of the Nepali Times, and he joined us by solar light from his Kathmandu home. He told me for the most part communities have been left to fend for themselves, and the aid that is getting in now faces an even bigger hurdle, getting it out to where it's needed beyond the capital. Kunda Dixit, welcome to the program. You are in Kathmandu right now, yes?
Yeah, Kathmandu, in the southern part of Kathmandu Valley.
And clearly in the dark, I think you've got your own sort of jerry-rigged light. What is the state of basic services? Electricity still out, water?
Yeah, well, but we're used to that in Kathmandu because we have power shortages all the time. So this is something we're actually used to. That's why we already have a solar system on our roof, which is what's powering this light. But in many parts of the city and the country, in fact, there is no electricity. There hasn't been for the last 3 years. For the last 3 days.
But do a lot of people have generators?
Yeah, they do have generators, but even that we're also used to.
What are you seeing today, sort of about 3 days after or 2 days after the quake hit? What is the state of people's survival, the ability to rescue people?
Well, last night was very bleak. It was the second night people were spending, outdoors in tents, and some didn't even have tents, in schoolyards, in parks, even in traffic islands, outdoors. And then it started raining. It rained all night. So it was really miserable. But this today has not been so bad. The sun came out. There have been no aftershocks now for nearly 9 hours. And compared to yesterday, I think the mood is slightly more upbeat. But, people do realize, of course, that there are still a lot of people trapped under the rubble in this city, and that the scale of the devastation in the mountain villages, which are very remote, is just becoming apparent today.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about that because we don't know about the remote. We don't know about the epicenter and what's happened around there. What we do know, however, is that drone photography overhead has shown that the majority of the capital is actually intact and that only a small but very visible historic center has collapsed. Give me a sense of the extent of the devastation.
Would kill 100,000 people, at least, outright, and that more would die of injuries later. In 1,100. So the casualty level is much lower, and I think the reason for that is probably that a lot of the residents, apartment buildings, the more modern buildings, were more or less intact. In fact, I think 90% of those buildings are intact. What fell down were the monuments, the temples, the 400-year-old palaces, Kathmandu's architectural heritage, because they were built of bricks and timber and mud and mortar.
As horrendous as that is historically and culturally, it does seem to me, though, that perhaps Nepal at this particular moment may have come out of it better than Why have you been writing so critically if, in fact, this is the case?
Well, first of all, it is only Kathmandu that came out relatively unscathed compared to what we had predicted for this magnitude earthquake. But having said that, I think the disaster preparedness is still woefully inadequate, even within Kathmandu. In Bhaktapur, which is a town east of Kathmandu, which has been devastated, there have been 300 fatalities there. Even there, which is only 7 kilometers from the capital, the state presence is almost negligible. So not only were we not prepared in terms of better, safer housing, we're not even prepared for the aftermath. And if this is the case so near to the capital, you can imagine what it is like up in the mountains.
So you're bracing for some really bad news once news comes in from the further reaches of the country?
I think the devastation is unimaginable. We are only getting indications today of how bad it is. A district that officially the death toll is only 200 is now looking more like 1,200. So I think, and some of the images that have been taken by helicopter pilots that have flown over some of these very remote villages in districts west of Kathmandu towards the epicenter, those are amazingly shocking sights of villages where not a single building is standing.
Kunda Dixit, editor of the Nepali Times, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks.
Now, as soon as the earthquake struck on Saturday, Valerie Amos started tweeting about what the United Nations is doing to help, like providing medical supplies, tents and food, and they do need body bags there too. She tells me for all humanitarian aid, it is now a race against time. Baroness Amos, welcome. Welcome again to the program under very dire circumstances. You yourself have tried to get to Nepal. Not possible.
Well,
get to Nepal. Not possible.
Well, getting in, that's the priority right now. The airport is becoming very, very congested, so I'm waiting, and if in the next couple of days it looks possible, I will go. I want to be able to keep the world's attention on this. It's terrible for Nepal, and of course, we've got a lot of UN humanitarian staff there, and we've also got our partner organisations that are very, very active on the ground.
And a lot of people, including the community itself, trying to help each other, some say in the absence of a lot of government help. But here's the thing. What does the pipeline need right now? You say you don't want to get in the way. What is the most need
for its situation? People need to be able to get water. Fuel supplies are running very low. Food, and obviously medical supplies. I mean, with nearly over 7,000 people injured, this is a huge number of people that we're talking about.
Let me read you some statistics which are quite shocking. I mean, this is a very poor country. 2.1 doctors and 50 hospital beds for every 10,000 people, as compared, for instance, from the United States. So the need is huge.
The need is enormous. It's putting a huge strain on the country. You talked about those early responders. Always in a situation like this, it's the local communities themselves that come to the aid of their neighbours. It's families helping other families. I've seen this in so many other situations, and really trying to recover.
What country is the best place? We've heard a lot about India, but we've heard other countries also flying in equipment and help. But what is the route in? Is it okay now for aid deliveries?
Nepal is a very mountainous country, so getting to those outlying areas remains really, really difficult. So there is a need for helicopters to get there. There is only one runway at the airport, so you can imagine trying to have commercial traffic and aid flights coming in is putting a huge pressure on already limited resources, and this is the difficulty. And with supplies, because you have to leave it open for flights to come in and out, and this manage things as effectively as we can.
Most people who've been in the capital, at least in Kathmandu, say thank goodness areas. What about the epicenter? Any...
It's very hard to know. We don't know how these casualty figures will rise. I mean, of course, we all hope they will stay as low as possible. But we urgently need to get the search and rescue teams in there. We need to get the rubble moved so that we can see whether others are trapped in that rubble. And then we have to get aid to these people who so desperately need it.
Now, I know you're the United Nations and you are reluctant to go down all sorts of political routes, but everybody is saying, particularly local editors, newspapers and others, that the government simply wasn't prepared, despite the fact that everybody was waiting for the big one, that, you know, years of civil war between Maoist insurgents and the government has left it, you know, fighting within itself and not really focusing on desiredness. Has that made a bad situation worse?
Our job is to try and support the government. This is a tricky situation for any government to have to deal with. It is a major, major crisis. They have not seen anything like this since 1934. It's a very long time. I mean, if you have something of this scale and people see this kind of thing on a regular basis, then the communities are more attuned as to what you do. It's a long time. The government is doing its best. It's asked the international community for additional support. They have done that quickly. The international community is coming in. We have to coordinate those efforts.
You are a former politician. You're a former minister. What difference does it make if, for instance, there are the local councillors and others in place, which there aren't? They haven't had the elections for years and years in Nepal. Can it be better for the future?
Well, of course, the better the local communities, the national authorities are organised, the more straightforward it is for the international community to come in and back them up. We have a coordination system inside Nepal. There is a national coordinator which is up. All the help that is coming in on the military side, what we've got to make sure is that it's all joined up and that as much as possible we minimise duplication of effort. I've seen the way that sometimes we fall over each other in our efforts to get aid in. It's also important that we get the right supplies in. Sometimes we put so much pressure on our governments by saying, well, what are you doing, what are you doing, that sometimes governments will just send supplies in because they want to be seen to be doing something. We have to make sure that as much as possible, what comes in is what is actually needed.
Under-Secretary General Amos, thank you very much indeed. A daunting challenge indeed.
Thank you very much.
Now, after a break, we will stay with the tragedy in Nepal, spreading across the country to its highest peaks, leaving people stranded and worse in Mount Everest.
I was working on my intelligent home system. It lets you turn on your washing machine and set your heating remotely. It's amazing.
We could have at least come up with an intelligent excuse.
You'll soon be able to fly on a fully electric plane, and I'm helping to make it possible.
Wow. Oh, and did you remember to change the light bulb in the lounge?
EDF continues to support progress today through the EDF Pulse Awards. Give pioneers your support too by voting for your favourite project at pulse.edf.com.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
Coming up on Open Court, make way for the clay. The race to Roland Garros heats up in Monte Carlo.
There's no better place to start a clay court season than here.
Plus, they call him the mastermind.
The pressure she has is unbelievable because every time she wins, it's normal. And if she loses, it's what's happening.
Hear what it's like coaching world #1 Serena Williams. And wedding bells are ringing in Scotland. Andy Murray ties the knot. Sunday on Open Court.
In association with Rado.
These are the shores of Aden. Aden has seen some of the fiercest fighting since the conflict in Yemen began. We're going into the ICU, the intensive care unit. This is the Bas Suhaib Hospital. It was originally a military hospital. It has become the de facto general hospital. There is a queue outside this bakery and all the others like it. This is all the flour that they have left. And when that's gone, there is no more.
Go for life in the fast lane, in the car and off the track. Go fast. Go tech. Go legendary. Go head to head. Go with the latest Formula One events. Go around the world with the circuit. Tuesday on CNN in association with DHL.
Welcome back to the program. Nepal's devastating earthquake struck just as the world's most daring climbers prepared to scale its highest peak. The trembling earth at Everest base camp triggered an avalanche. Its terrifying moment of impact caught on camera.
Oh!
At least 17 people have been killed on Everest. And joining me now from Gloucestershire in West England is the English mountaineer Kenton Cool, who scaled the mountain 11 times, and he's also lost 3 Sherpa friends in this disaster. Kenton Cool, thank you for joining me. Let me go straight to asking you, there were a lot of beeps on that video that we just showed. I'm assuming it was expletive-laden. What is the sheer terror of being in that kind of situation? You've been there before.
I have. I mean, it's one of those things that generally when you see an avalanche coming down, you very quickly assess about you have a rough idea about the power and whether it's going to reach you. In the video, what we see there is 2 climbers or a couple of climbers, and they're kind of marveling about the fact there's an avalanche, that there's an earthquake is coming, that avalanche extremely quickly. It would have been mind-numbingly frightening. It would have been just all empowering, and it would have been upon them extremely quickly. So the expletives, the X-ray out there, I'm not surprised at all. It would have been a the world would have stopped.
And let's face it, you know, more than a dozen people have been killed and there's still people stranded. You know, fortunately, it has to be said that these are of the luck will be going on. Are you in touch with any friends, any fellow climbers right now?
I've been in contact constantly since Saturday. It's been difficult with communications. Communication in and out of base camps is never that easy. The climbers at Everest are, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're comparatively comfortable. They've got good medical facilities there. They've got shelter and food. Some of the more remote Nepali Himalayan villages, they have very little. They're running out of food, running out of fresh water. There's no helicopters coming in and out. So it's a very, very bleak scene right across the backbone of the Himalayas in Nepal, not right now, from the Annapurnas through Langtang, Mawaling, Everest itself, and also the Makalu and Hinku valleys. It's a very desperate time.
Kenton, it is obviously a really risky and dangerous thing. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted climbing Everest, but they do, climbers such as yourself, know the dangers ahead. But is it even more dangerous now that there are so many, some call, you know, less trained, less professional, slightly more amateurs, you know, flooding the zone?
Well, there is definitely an argument for that. The clients that go to, or the Western paying clients that go, perhaps don't have the skill set to climb that mountain without guides like myself. I am an Everest guide. I take people up and down the mountainside. However, an occurrence such as this, it has absolutely nothing to do with how skillful or otherwise a person is. This is essentially an act of God, you know, for want of another term. And there's nothing you can do. Even the most experienced climber can do nothing to prepare themselves for a 7.9 magnitude earthquake, followed by, you know, one of the biggest avalanches Everest has probably ever seen. And I think if you look at the people who have been injured, you know, it's completely indiscriminate. It just really depended where you were on the mountain at that particular time.
And you yourself have lost 3 Sherpa friends in this avalanche, in this disaster. Tell me about them, and where were they? You know, how did they get caught while others escaped?
So the place that we normally set our base camp is one of the closer camps to the Nepal, where the avalanche originated from. So the spot that I would use as base camp, and my Sherpa team would have been there this year. It would have been, you know, it would have borne the full brunt of the force of that avalanche. Some of the Sherpas were higher on the mountain and are perfectly safe, but it was the core of the sort of the base camp staff. One of the cooks has been killed. A very dear friend that I've known for many years, and a lovely, beautiful man with you know, a number of daughters that he now leaves without a father. So I say, very indiscriminate. It didn't really matter who you were or where you were. It was an act of God, and very, very sad, because the Sherpa people are beautiful people.
Kenton Cool, thank you very much indeed for your reflections on this day. Thanks for joining us. And after a break, we imagine the world of Nepal today. Now it's one that's scarred for life by the horrifying tremors, images that people will never forget when we come back.
Dubai is a very exciting place for architects. This is a metropolis that didn't exist 50 years ago. But it's a city that is showing us how the future might look. Burj Khalifa is a groundbreaking piece of architecture because it destroys all our preconceptions of what a building is. What does it feel like? How do they do it? How is it possible? It's a building that tests our understanding of space and time. Anything is possible. That's what I find inspiring about Dubai. There are no limits.
Innovators, influencers, they've reached the top and are today's leading women. Inspiring individuals sharing their insights on CNN. This month, you know their names, maybe you've worn the dress or walked in the shoes. What it took for Diane von Furstenberg and Tory Burch to become fashion icons.
This year we celebrate our 40th anniversary of the wrap dress. And that dress, I owed everything.
Leading women, Saturday on CNN.
On the next Inside Africa.
Ethiopia, a country with a cuisine that stretches back thousands of years, an economy that relies very heavily on its exports of coffee. This week, we are exploring Ethiopia's food and drink, its staples and some new directions.
Inside Africa, Tuesday only on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
On May the 7th, it will be the election that proves every vote counts. Anna Manpour, Halagarani and Max Foster. It's the UK election on May the 7th on CNN.
imagine a world haunted by terror of the big one. That's the world of Nepal, which every January marks National Earthquake Safety Day to remember the massive one that ripped apart Kathmandu 80 years ago. Now, these images of the latest quake will forever be seared into the national consciousness. Let us all take a look together. So the death toll stands at nearly 4,000. Remember, we still don't know what awaits the first responders once they get to the far-out villages and valleys. And if you want to contribute to the charities trying to ease the suffering, go to cnn.com/impact for a guide on who's helping and how to help them. And that's it for our program tonight. Remember, you can always see the whole show online at amanpour.com and follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching, and goodbye from London.
So tell me about